Welcome back to the Erotic Realm. As the year comes to a close, I've been reflecting on the conversations that shaped this season, the stories and psychologies that revealed how diverse, complex, and beautiful the erotic mind can be. Over the next 2 months, I'll be releasing a special end-of-year series, 2 episodes a week from now until the end of December. You'll also hear the live recordings from the Erotic Realm Confessionals, the first of which was released this week. And I'll also dive deep into the major themes that emerged this year across gender and BDSM roles. And for my 40th birthday in December, an intimate special exploring my very own erotic realm. And for the many of you who have joined recently, this is the perfect doorway into the erotic realm, where we explore the science, symbolism, and stories of desire, one erotic realm at a time. If you'd like to support this work as it grows into 2026 and beyond, you can become a paid subscriber on Substack for the price of a coffee a month. Your support allows me to continue with the mission of the erotic realm, which is humanizing kink and darker desires. Simply visit psychologyofdesire.substack.com. And to close out the year, I'll be releasing a New Year's special, a collection of mini episodes sharing people's kinky desires and erotic resolutions for the year ahead. And then I'll be bringing those same guests back at the end of next year to see what became of their erotic goals. It should be really fun to see the evolution and what happened over the year. And by the way, just a quick note to let you know that I'm currently having a Black Friday sale at Psychology of Desire. This means there's 50% off an annual subscription, which gets you discount to courses, all of my events next year, and also it's a way that you can support the Erotic Realm Podcast continuing and spreading the mission of humanizing kink even more and finding people just like you. So if you want to support this mission and get the discount to the events next year, head over to psychologyofdesire.substack.com and you'll see the link there to subscribe and you can get 50% off. This is only for 48 hours. I'll see you there. But for now, let's return back to the revisiting of the episode. Enjoy. The following conversation is with Ancilla, a 33-year-old writer, masochist, and kink educator from India. Ancilla is deeply immersed in the world of BDSM, embodying roles such as slave, emotional masochist, and bootblack in her DS dynamic with her soulmate, Mancilla. In this episode, Ancilla shares her unique perspective on submission and the strength it takes to surrender, the transformative power of pain, and her passion for kink education. The transformative power of pain and her passion for kink education through her groundbreaking Sexed Book initiative. We also discuss her experiences with a 2-week-long CNC dynamic and how it shaped her understanding of trust, intimacy, and self-discovery. Ancilla's journey blends personal growth, creativity, and activism, offering invaluable insights into the psychology of BDSM and the erotic mind. I hope you enjoy this compelling and thought-provoking conversation. Hi everyone and welcome to the Erotic Realm. Today I'm excited to have with me Ancilla. Welcome Ancilla.
Hi, it's nice to be here.
Lovely to have you. So let's first of all get an idea for your erotic realm. How would you describe your sexuality?
As masochistic in one word. I guess pain is a really important part of it. It's like the center of my sexual and erotic experiences. I'd also describe it as, I guess, a bit ideological in the sense that it's very intersectional with the rest of the world. So there's a lot of like sexuality between me and partners, but there's also a continuing erotic experience with like life, the environment around me, how it influences what I do sexually and what I desire sexually. So it's like kind of pervasive.
Okay. Interesting. So is that the only role that you would describe yourself as, a masochist? Do you inhabit any other roles in your kinky sexuality?
I mean, I guess with specific partners, there are different roles. So I identify as a slave to my partner. So there's that. So there's the power exchange element of it. Sometimes in other relationships, there are other bottom-based roles that I may take, but it kind of is extremely dependent on who I'm with. Control is an aspect of my sexuality, but it's usually secondary to the pain aspect of my sexuality.
Okay, interesting. So you mentioned being a slave in a dom-sub relationship. Can you tell us a little bit about the difference for you between a submissive and a slave?
I guess to me, it's a technical difference in the sense that I see submission as sort of control exercise in a hierarchical system that's been agreed upon by the parties, whereas control in a slave master mistress situation would be ownership contingent, where like the view is of the other person as property, as opposed to there being like a hierarchical system that determines which way the instruction flows. But in practice, often they can look very similar because I guess people also interpret these roles depending on how they understand them. So in practice, like often the way that it's discussed, it's like slaves are more hardcore or things like that. I don't subscribe to any notions like that. Romantically, that's the role that appeals to me. To feel owned by another person is what appeals to me. So that is why I identify in that direction.
So it's the ownership that is the difference between a sub and a slave for you?
That would be it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so talking about surrender, how do you experience surrender in your DS relationship as a slave?
So I guess it's important to make like the distinction between submission and surrender for me, because like I see submission as a bit of a decision to act. Like there is the choice to obey something that specifically is being told to you. I'm not saying that like surrender is devoid of choice, but it's more environment contingent. So I would liken it to something like, you know how if you live in a really cold place, or like I live in a really rural area, which is extremely mountainous. So the circumstances, the vicissitudes of existing in a terrain like this are something that you accept without really specifically signing on to them. So I guess that is how I view surrender, though within the relationship, there is an understanding of what you are signing up for beforehand, but it's more environmental than it is. This is the realm within which it exists, or it's more in lots of different directions. And sometimes, like how you experience the relationship emotionally is not. It's not curated. It's not like decided upon. There isn't that much discussion about exactly how you want to feel. There is a possibility of it going in multiple directions, and you accept all of that possibility.
Okay, very interesting. Now, you mentioned before about your erotic self intersecting with socio-political movements. Can you tell us more about that and perhaps share a moment when this connection became particularly clear or impactful for you?
Okay, so first of all, like social political movements in terms of like how you're raised, like sometimes when you discuss it that way, it sounds way more clinical than it is in actuality. So like when I was younger, I realized that I had like this desire for pain and control, but I did not know how that looks in a relationship. So I would evaluate my environment for how does it look. And usually I saw it manifested within abusive relationships, within relationships where one partner was being exploited, but it was the only representation around me. So I extracted like things that are attractive to me from within those relationships, from within that environment, because it felt very much like that is the only environment that enables this kind of exchange, especially until you're old enough to like know how to articulate your desires or identify a community that also practices the same thing. So when I started seeking relationships, I was actively seeking abusive relationships because it genuinely felt like that is the only way I could get what I want, and everything that comes with it is sort of like the cost of it. As I realized that's not the case, and I started having access to environments where that that did not have to be the case, I did also realize that the imagery of abuse had become very deeply ingrained in like what I consider erotic. So extracting like the technicalities of like an abusive relationship and adapting them sexually to a consensual relationship is how like the social environment from where you learned your association becomes intersected with your sexuality.
Yeah, the difference between abuse and kink is such an important topic. So thanks for highlighting that there. You also label yourself as a masochist and a feminist. And there are some people out there who suggest that you can't be both. They might say to surrender to another person or give up control is an anti-feminist idea. Can you speak to this? And what do you say to those people that have that belief?
So, first of all, any belief that is so hardline that it doesn't consider the nuances is one that sometimes feels a bit wasteful to engage with, because if you've already developed that belief system without thinking more deeply about the subject, then you're not going to engage with me when I actually engage with you on the subject. That being said, this subject is extremely important to me and something I talk about frequently when I teach as well. So like one of the things obviously we talk a lot about how when somebody chooses to submit or to accept pain or relinquish control to another person, they are making a choice, and that choice in itself is what makes the action feminist, let's say feminist. But in actuality, it's not just the act of making the choice, it's also realizing the environment in which you make the choice. So for example, when I was younger and I had male partners, I would engage in like domestic servitude, which meant sometimes cleaning their apartments or like cooking for them and things like that. Now, in and of itself, that was just an erotic act to me. But in context of the relationship, if there were men who felt they shouldn't have to do that because they are men, my submission would not engage with that kind of person. Or if there is a person who is like, I have a child now, and the child lives with me and his father, so I'm his stepmother, and he lives with us and his dad. And now if this child is being raised in this house, I may be performing acts of domestic service, but the child may still continue to view it as women do the housework and men don't so much do the housework. So it means adapting my relationship in such a way that I am mindful of the example that I'm sending to the child. So it's important for the child to see that labor can and should be shared in an egalitarian way. So in that case, I choose representation over like expressing my sexuality in this realm. So I do less of that because it's more important to me to send the message to the child that you must not let your gender or the one that you've been socialized as influence what you're entitled to in society. Now that is a feminist act, but if you approach it so arbitrarily that the act of submitting in itself is not a feminist act, then you'll never be able to get to the depth of that. Whereas you can happily proclaim yourself to be a feminist, continue to do all of the domestic work in your home simply for the reason that you are not employed and your partner may be. Now, is that a feminist act or not a feminist act? I wouldn't engage with it in the same arbitrary way that people who make this argument tend to engage with this subject.
Beautifully said. Now, as part of the podcast, I like to explore a quote around sexuality. And today I'd like to ask your viewpoint about a quote from Dossie Easton and Janet Hardy, who are co-authors of well-known books and most well-known for their book, The Ethical Slut. Today's quote comes from one of their other books, however, the new Bottoming book, which is all about the person who takes the receiving role during sexuality and kink scenes. The quote is, "Being a bottom is not about weakness. It is about strength, the strength to trust, to give up control, and to surrender to the care of another." I'm curious to hear from you if this quote mirrors your experience as a masochist. Have you found strength in your submission? And what would you say to those who might see submission as a weakness?
Actually, I think I have to start by addressing this like binary system of viewing it, of like it's either strength or it is weakness.
Yes.
I find it incredibly empowering to be able to view my submission as weakness when I wanted to and strength when I wanted to. Because like the problem is that weakness bad, strength good. But why? Like if I want to be weak, and also weak is arbitrary, like it's difficult to define weak, right? Like physically weak? Is it like if you can't take something, does that equal weakness? Or is it like emotional weakness? And how does emotional weakness manifest? Like if you break down and cry, are you being weak? Versus if you stand tall and have a stoic response, you are not being weak. It's difficult to define exactly how this manifests for individual people. But whatever I do view personally as weakness, I love that submission allows me to show that, because like honestly, the way I was raised and the way that I've been socialized, it's been ingrained into me all my life that if I wanted to be a strong professional woman and I wanted to exist in this world that heavily favors men, I've got to always be extremely strong. So weakness is the part that's really, it's disallowed to you. Like it's disallowed, this concept of like breaking down or like being able to be helpless. It is disallowed to you. So if I want to view that as weakness, which sometimes I do and sometimes I don't, I want a space where I can do that. So from the point of view of the writer, I understand what they're trying to say is maybe even somewhat similar to what I am saying, that it's not a disempowering act, it is an empowering act to be able to put yourself in a situation where you accept not only someone else's control, but also the fact that they care for you and they see you exactly as you are and want to cater to that. And to that end, I do agree with them, but maybe the phrasing, I would have put it differently.
Fascinating take. Thank you for sharing. I'm curious to hear more about what pain itself means to you. Do you find pain itself pleasurable, or is it the results of pain, such as the endorphins that are released, or is it a mixture of both?
Definitely both, but for sure, the primary pleasure for me is sensation. At least when it comes to physical pain, like it is a very large part of it. So when I did even start realizing that I had a sexuality, that is just how it manifested. Like the thing that I desired was not genital. It was not somebody touch me there or like I should touch myself there. It was I should hurt myself because there is a pleasure I experience as a result of doing it. So it is very much the sensation for me that starts off the pleasure cycle. But yes, of course, the response to it, like what happens in your body when you're in a state of pain, or when you're coming down from a state of pain, or when you're retroactively visiting a state of pain that may have been too intense for you to process in the moment. They are all allied pleasures that are also very important to me. So basically, I guess what I would say is that it's a narrative. It's not just the act, it's not just the consequence, it's also the association, it's also the person who's with you at the time and how they interact with you and what has the greatest impact. Because sometimes it's things like how much you're hurting me, but sometimes it's also you're hurting me so much and in the middle of it you just take a moment to like stroke my cheek or something, and in that case the tenderness becomes like the center of pleasure for at least that encounter. So in general terms, I can say that pain is directly pleasurable to me as well as indirectly pleasurable to me, but it is the experience, like the cumulative experience around pain that you can create, that is the heart of the pleasure.
I love the complexity that you've highlighted there. Thank you for that. So considering pain's been such a revelation for you and it sounds like you've explored it so much, I wanted to look at an article together that investigated the nature of pain in BDSM and why people might be drawn to painful experiences. So sure. The title of the article is No Pain, No Gain, Therapeutic and Relational Benefits of Subspace in BDSM Contexts. So in this article, they looked at why people engage in receiving pain, and they found two main themes. The first theme was that the administration of pain resulted in transcendent or altered states of consciousness. And the second theme was that they found that it allowed more self-awareness via the forming and enacting of sexual scripts, or in other words, people were learning more about their sexuality by role-playing during the painful scenarios. Does this resonate with you at all? Does pain help you achieve altered states of consciousness?
Of course. I mean, that's unavoidable. But I relate very strongly with the sexual scripts. That's actually, it's a major part of what I was trying to say when I said that my sexuality intersects with the world. Sexual script is the correct term for that. And yes, like pain in a very clinical way, where like you're pinching me and that's all that's happening and the sensation is all there is pleasurable. However, association around that. Why are you doing it? Why are you pinching me? And why am I enjoying it? What are the circumstances that led to it? What is the relationship between us that's causing it? All of that, and also that relationship being centered within a social space, where the script on pain may be different or it may be multi-layered, that is what does all of it. Like that is the reason why the act is so desirable. Like right off the bat, there is some kind of it is contradictory to what we think of as human nature to engage in something that you're supposed to avoid. Like even when it comes to clinical definitions of pain, it's always described and as a state that you should avoid, and one that is unpleasant and one that indicates harm. So right off the bat, if you're engaging in something that's defined as that, there is sort of a freeing that you can go now in any direction from here, because the script is like to some degree already abandoned. But then the script also influences your responses, and then you unlearn those responses, or you learn pleasure-based association with something else, or romantic association with the person who's doing those things to you, and how you define love and romance could be influenced by that. So it's like this entire spectrum of possibility which exists within this. And then you have like your own sexual narrative.
So the research also showed that achieving altered states of consciousness during consensual BDSM interactions can result in a reduction of physical and psychological stress, and it can also bring about a feeling of heightened intimacy between partners. So you just mentioned about the romantic side then. Have you felt less stressed and closer to your partners after a particularly painful session?
Yes, but also it's hard to tell because your responses can be different. Like sometimes when I've engaged very heavily in very physical play, I just need some distance to process everything. And that distance to process is like a part of the experience where I'm communing with myself. So there is like a romance and an intimacy, but it's more internal than it is external. And sometimes what happens is that you do feel extremely connected because you possibly you were inhabiting this very rarefied experience with each other, and only the two of you can, I suppose, understand like the depth of it. So that would lead to more heightened intimacy. I do like that they made the distinction between like consensual pain leading to this response and non-consensual pain not leading to this response, because within masochistic spaces there is a lot of discussion about like, so if it's just pain and if it's just pain you like, then it doesn't really matter the environment in which you sustain it. But like to a person who's has some degree of experience with encountering pain in both circumstances, it is very clear the distinction, because like when you did not agree to or want to be in pain, your natural response will always be that of panic, and that will override everything you experience and cause you to feel traumatized or whatever. Whereas with the consensual pain, there is some degree of physical panic that may come from being struck, but it abates and you're able to really center yourself in the experience. So I'm glad they made that distinction, actually.
Yes, me too. So have you experienced subspace from your painful experiences? And if so, can you tell the listeners what subspace is like for you?
I'm really sorry to be like kind of contrarian. I realize that may be how I'm sounding.
Please do it. Go ahead, be yourself.
I try to avoid using the term subspace. Okay. It's too general. And So I try to be much more specific about the various types of altered states of being that I do experience. Yes, I do experience altered states of being. And if you want a general, like a general definition for subspace, I would use one that is technical like that it is an altered state of being that causes varying degrees of behaviors in people that are more individualized. So sometimes, though, because subspace can often look like silence, it can look like a nonverbal state, extreme relaxation, it can look like a flow state, it can look like all of these things that can also very easily look like other things. It's difficult to make the distinction of which one you're experiencing. So sometimes the things that you're engaging in, if they're extremely intense or extremely they're going on for a long period of time, what I do experience sometimes is a state of shock. But that state of shock would make me behave in similar ways that a state of like extreme relaxation would make me behave. So they could both be easily put in the subspace category. So which is why I try to be more mindful of like exactly where I'm at. Because sometimes it's euphoria. And euphoria for me, I know should not be the decision-making factor in whether I should continue to do something or not. Because I know that my body is sending me messages that you're invincible. So if it is sending me that message, then the chances that I will not pay enough attention to what else is going on with me physically is really high. So at that time, committing to like a flow state is probably not the best idea. Whereas sometimes it is like an altered state of consciousness, like being tipsy. It's kind of like you're enjoying everything and the sensation is heightened. And in that one, I know I can still continue to trust my body and my consciousness in that situation. So, which is why I try to avoid subspace, but just like make distinctions between various states of unconsciousness, like altered consciousness.
Thank you for breaking down subspace like that. I haven't heard it broken down like that before, so that's really interesting. Now, for the listeners, I ask people to fill out a form before coming on the podcast, and on it, I ask various questions about your sexuality and the why behind your desire to be on the podcast. Now, your main reason, Ancilla, was to share your story to help others understand themselves, but also to speak about kink education, particularly the Sexed Book Initiative. Can you share with us more about this initiative, what inspired it, and what is its mission?
So it started kind of as a joke. I went to a creative writing school, and I guess I have a slightly peculiar and sometimes very technical way of speaking. And I was doing that once in class, and my professor just scoffed at me and said, all you're going to write someday is textbooks. And at that moment, I was really hurt by what he said, because I mean, I am a writer and I do want to write like creative stuff. But as I got older, I realized actually, you know what? I kind of am good at taking things that may be complex and breaking them down into adaptable function. So like that's what a textbook does. It allows all sorts of people access to structure that makes information easier to digest. So the reason I wanted to write books about sex, like sex books in particular, is because I think with kink especially, there is a lot, like it is a vast umbrella, and talking about it in general has its benefits. But when you really want to engage, you kind of need specific information. So the two sex books that I have written is called, one of them is the consensual non-consent sex book, and the other one is the masochism sex book. And both of them just deal with that subject. And they deal with it by creating like these sort of extremely adaptable frameworks that break them down into functional elements that you actually experience and you actually encounter, like logistical elements that you may actually encounter when attempting to engage in these things. Not moralizing elements, but more questions that I see people come up with repeatedly, but not have like a clear place to go for answers. So a lot of the answers that we give people about these things, they're really feeling based sometimes. And sometimes we're just saying the good words, but when it actually comes down to facing dilemma or like trying to solve a problem that you're actually experiencing, those good words don't translate into, well, how do I go about thinking about this in the first place? Like even something as simple as I want to try some kind of like some version of CNC, but what version? Like, what versions even exist? How do you understand it as an ideological construct and then adapt it into what you actually want to do in practice? So that was the idea behind it, is that you take individual fetishes or experiences and break them down until anybody who reads it can with clarity understand how to, whether they want to, why do they want to, but also to do it in a way that it's still them that's controlling whether, how much, and you're just giving them all of the information with all of the options without any of the moralizing.
I love it. Can you share with us more about what CNC is for those that might not know and what you teach in the CNC sext book?
Okay, so consensual non-consent, very simply, is when so the way that I define it is like it's an ideological construct in which you take consent and put it in two categories. So there is overarching consent and proximal consent. So proximal consent is the one where you want to be able to say no or want to stop with certain things, but you want your partner to continue. So how do you achieve that state of being where you can safely do that while still retaining consent in an overall sense where you know that you've consented to that act of seeming apparent violation?
Wonderful. So how do you approach breaking down these intricate aspects of BDSM like masochism and CNC? What's your approach and procedure of doing this?
So first, I structure information into like categories so that it makes it easier to approach. So like with masochism, for example, you'd start with a very simple like understanding of the term and also like the influences on the connotation of the term. So because it's not just that this term exists and it came from this place, but also how has the term been influenced over the years? So like with masochism, there's a major influence from the mental health community, and the connotations of it have also been adapted from there. So how you view it today as an individual who practices pain may be different from how it's been defined by the experts in the field for a really long time. So first you make sense of that. And then you start with like systems. So like with masochism, how do you define it as an individual? So like I define it in terms of desire. Like, do you desire pain? It's a very simple question. It doesn't need a secondary answer. So like yes or no, but then what is the reason? So there is different reasons we all desire pain. For some people, it is the sensation. For some people, it is the emotion it evokes. For some people, it's the delayed pleasure. For some people, it's because it makes them happy to endure for another person. That is motivation. So then you take motivation and you separate it into as many functions as you can, so that any person who's reading it can locate their motivation and see how that specific motivation influences how they can be safer while they do it, how they can understand better where their motivation is coming from. So I do that with basically anything that touches masochism.
So what would you say sets the Sext Book initiative apart from other kink education resources, and how do you hope it evolves over time?
So I don't know about a part. I hope that it's a good addition to everything that already exists. So like, I think different things are required. So like, if you do write the kind of content, which is like a primer, that's also important. If you write an overall take, that's also important. And if you write a more granular textbook type function, that's also important. So I hope it makes a good addition. The way that I wanted to progress, so currently I'm working on the Power Exchange textbook. It's almost done. So it should be out before the end of this month. And I want to continue doing that. I want to continue writing books about specific sexual function. So I have one on sexual communication that is like a book that applies to more than just kink, and that would be just communication focused, but not like you should trust and be honest, but also really like how do you identify your own dishonesty when you don't realize that you may be coming from a dishonest space. So like just more adaptable. I'd like to do one on cuckolding as well. And the masochism one contains an emotional masochism component, but I also like to do a more detailed one on emotional masochism itself as well down the line. So basically as many as I can think of, I'm going to write.
Wonderful. I look forward to reading them. What's been the most surprising or rewarding feedback you've received from someone engaging with your sex book materials so far?
that it made it genuinely easier for them to ask for and identify what they want. Honestly, I was really surprised by the response to in the masochism sex book in particular. Like, my books do decent sales, but that one, it was like off the charts. I was shocked by the fact that so many people were like engaging with the material, recommending it, and then continuing to purchase it. And at this point, it's like my best-selling book. And I think it's because a lot of people have a lot of the same questions about masochism that they don't get answered in a way that isn't about, first of all, it's not entirely emotionally driven, the answer. Like, it's not about my feelings, what I think you should do. It's not so biased. It's more like acknowledging the possibility of all experience. So it makes it a lot clearer for a person. And also it breaks down the process, because sometimes that's the confusing part. So it's when somebody reads it and achieves clarity on what they want, that's the most rewarding aspect of it.
So as part of our conversation today, I asked you to bring along something to share, such as a quote, a book, movie that's influenced your sexuality. Can you share with us what you've brought along today and how it shaped your understanding of your erotic realm?
So I don't bring anything, but I did think about your question, especially since it was framed in the context of like when you were just starting out before you. So actually, for me, I think it was the dictionary is what I was thinking about your answer, because I already knew that like I wanted to experience pain, and I already saw these things around me that were kind of turning me on, but I had no idea that that's what was happening. So I just started looking up words in the dictionary when I was really young. Words like beat and hit and thrash and words like that. And then, they have those sample sentences in there about with those words. And then sometimes I would read those sentences, and it would be extremely gratifying to know that like this exists in the world. Like, these words exist in the world. Therefore, these acts exist in the world. And therefore, there is definitely more to like understand. There's more to like know about it. And also, this was before like I realized that you could engage with things like this in a more organized system. Like, I did not know that pornography or erotica were a thing. So for me, the dictionary was where all of it existed. And then, inspired by the dictionary, I just started writing it myself. And because like the dictionary has very cold clinical sentences, and I wanted mine to be more, I guess, romantic and deliberately trying to evoke sexuality. Other than that, I guess a writer that's very influential to me is Anais Nin, but I think that's because I identify with her as a writer a lot more than like writing is actually a really big part of my sexuality, because I write erotica. It's what I started writing. It's like how I started writing. And I also write erotic novels, and that is where like the reality of my existence lies. So, and it's a bit of an obsession, because like it's not just autobiographical, it's also like real time writing. It's like as I live life, I live it through a political lens, an emotional lens, a mental lens, a familiar lens, but also an erotic one. And that one is all encompassing as much as the rest of them. So, and that's kind of how she writes, where like all of her is engaged with the world constantly, and it's living this like extremely active existence where it recognizes the impact of everything on every component of her. So that I find I identify with quite a bit. So I've read all of her journals, and I frequently revisit them. And it's just because I love the intensity, and that is a big part of why I love kink and masochism or control or any of these elements, is because the intensity. And writing allows you to experience that intensity with consistency, like not just when you're living it, but also when you're done, when you're writing it, when you revisit it, when you share it with the world. It's like an intensity that never dies. It's like an immortal intensity.
So you've written extensively on power exchange and sadomasochism. How has creating these instructional materials deepened your own personal understanding of these dynamics?
I mean, the more structure you have to create, the more structure you're going to apply to yourself as well. So, like, that is also a bit how my brain is wired. So, like, I relish the opportunity to create structure. But once you dedicatedly sit and think about it, like how structure allows you to think of your experiences in this organized form, especially in ways that you don't miss anything. So, I think it's made me more mindful of like how to keep myself safer as well. It's also taught me to identify much better exactly what I value in partners, because I can on a very granular level identify my own needs as well and see what is the best counterpart for that. So definitely that, and articulation. So like I now understand much better what is important to share with like a person who might be hurting me, because earlier it's not that it's an active process, right? You continue to learn how to negotiate with each negotiation that you go through. But sometimes you realize, you think that you've hit the peak of it. You've hit the peak of what needs to be communicated to a person. But realizing certain things, like after I wrote the Masochism sex book, I realized that communicating to the other person the timeline on my pleasure is actually really helpful, because sometimes there are a lot of people who, like, when they are experiencing pain, like the act of it in the moment, it doesn't look like pleasure, not even in like a warped sense, because some people screaming is equivalent of pleasure, but for some people it's just not. So but that makes it difficult to decide or tell whether a person's really enjoying it. Whereas if I communicate that like my form of pleasure is delayed or even retrospective, which is that I don't need to, like, only when I revisit this experience will it be pleasurable to me, or only in its aftermath will it be pleasurable to me, that makes like what's happening in scene make a lot more sense to the person hurting me, for instance. So like earlier when I was younger, I would never communicate that in advance. I also did not know how to phrase it. But now I know to do that. I also know to communicate certain things. Like I know that one of the major issues that most people who talk to me about their sadomasochistic experience is that the way that the person is hitting you is not pleasurable. It's not allowing you to relax. So like taking apart what is inside that way that they are hitting you. So for some people, I've learned that it's about pattern development. So like in your head, if somebody is doing like some form of impact play with you, say with a cane, and they're hitting two different parts of your body, left and right, you have also come to anticipate the pain in a certain part of your body. And when that person misses over that part of the body, because they don't realize that aiming the same implement on two different sides from the same position does not mean that the same part of the implement is making contact with the body, which means that on the left of you, you're experiencing a different sensation, and the right of you is experiencing a different sensation. And maybe you like one of them and you don't like the other one, but it's hard to figure out what exactly the problem is there. So like that kind of thing is, I could only really start to understand it when I started to take things apart structurally, like outside of just my personal experience, but also outside of like experience-based learning, in the sense that I have done this, therefore I know this, but more like, well, I know bodies and I know pain and I know my experience as a masochist, and I know that not everybody is a masochist, and I know that this is how bodies react. How does all of that interact with each other? So I think like writing those books gives you the opportunity to put all these experiences together and understand things better.
We have a tradition on the podcast where I ask my guest a question sourced from one of the listeners. And today's listener question is an interesting one. Do you believe you have always been kinky? And if so, what was one of your earliest memories of something kinky?
Yes. I do. I tend to say that I've always been sexual, but yeah, I guess effectively it's the same thing. And I would like, my earliest experience is soliciting pain from like caregivers or like people in my life, but as a really young person, by doing things that are wrong and likely to make that person hurt me. In sort of a punitive way. So it's not a very pleasant story. It's not like a fun answer. but it was way before I had any language for sexuality or any idea that what I was experiencing was a sexual desire. And obviously, the people involved in this scenario who were willing to hit a very young person were not the best teachers for what direction your sexuality should take or anything. But yeah, that is the earliest experience. Oh, the other one, and I guess this one is a bit more fun. I loved blood tests my whole life. And I mean, I was always excited when I had to get one or like get a shot. Like, I don't like being sick, but like, I knew that I like needles. So yeah, that like in medical circumstances, I would always get a bit excited. I still can't go to like a clinic without getting excited about the potential needles.
Are you able to share with us a peak sexual experience that you've had and why it was a peak experience for you?
Okay, I can. I'll do two because I sort of like to compare and contrast them. So I am really into prolonged play, which is like over the course of days or weeks. So with a former partner, I did like a week-long confinement scene, and then with a different partner more recently, I did a two-week-long continuous captivity kind of thing. They were both very different experiences. At least the first one was much more physically harrowing in the sense that I was actually locked in a basement, and it wasn't like a primped out basement. It was like a basement. And there weren't a lot of facilities, and the food and water, like all of it was very metered. And the person that I did it with was not actually, well, the relationship around the broader relationship was quite abusive. So while that experience was peak in a lot of ways, it wasn't in the best settings. The second one, it was 2 weeks long, and it wasn't captivity to that degree. Like I was in my house, and but basically my only point of contact was this person and nobody else. And it was like a continuous scene, so like you don't really exit out of it. So like there was a lot of structure around it. And that one is in a relationship that I love, and with a person that I love extremely much, who is very invested in my well-being. And both of them were extremely intense, and both of them like taught me a shit ton about myself. So like one of the things is like, what can you live without? Like, because we live this existence where like everything's accessible, right? Like I live in a super rural part of my country, but even I operate with impunity on the front that like anything I really need and want, I can have at any moment that I want. Whereas this kind of experience, it really shows you what you can live without. You can live without functioning running water so long as you have a metered dosage coming at you every 6 hours. You can live without compassion. You can live without all of these things, and it'll enable you to inhabit the kind of experience that outside of this context would be terrible. Like deprivation of this kind only happens when your country goes through like a human rights crisis, or like when there's been an extreme loss of civil liberties for very bad reasons. But you can take your relationship and recreate that kind of strife for yourself, and that's cool. It's amazing that you can do that within the context of a desirable experience. And that allows you to actually engage with the experience without having to worry about being okay after it's over, because you know that you're fundamentally okay. So I would say that was a peak sexual experience for me, both of them. And both of them, like they caused permanent changes in me in some ways, permanent changes also in like how I engage with those partners. Like the first one, it gave me tremendous water insecurity. I can literally never be without my water bottle. It was 10 years ago and I still can't do it. And I will still, like, I cannot go to bed if there aren't 2 liters of water by my nightstand. I am a very water drinky person, as I think all humans are, but that really did make me insecure. And with the second one, it changed how I receive certain sexual acts from my partner forever, especially like the penetrative sexual act. It changed the context of that from intimacy to something much more detached. And something but not detached in an undesirable way. Detached in a, can you take this thing that has for ages been considered the center of sexual relationships with heterosexual people and turn it into a minuscule act that doesn't even connect you? And yeah, it's like that. So, I mean, overall, I love it, but it sounds a bit dispassionate.
What was the aftercare like for these experiences? Was it another 2 weeks afterwards where you did aftercare? Was it a shorter aftercare? How did you go about that?
So the first one, there was none. Again, that relationship was not ideal. And I was a lot more traumatized than I realized at the time. So I just, as that scene ended, I just went to work, and for a month, I did not stop working. Like, that's all I kept doing. And because I work the kind of profession where it is actually possible for you to work like that, nobody thought that there was anything wrong. Like, everybody just thought I was doing what. So it was only after that month had passed that I realized how much of an impact it had on me. And if there was any kind of care available, I think I'd missed my window on like accessing it. With my other partner, there is a lot of like, so first of all, it's an environment of care. It's not just like pre-care or during the scene or aftercare. It's also like, I wouldn't engage in this kind of play with somebody unless I fundamentally felt cared for in that relationship. So like, also as it's ongoing, the fact that he does not stop is not just an indication that I don't have control. It's also an indication that everything's okay. Because I know that everything was not okay, he would stop. So I didn't feel as uncared for, which means that in the aftermath of it, like the sudden and complete care that you need to descend on a person with, it wouldn't be comfortable for me. So he couldn't do that. It was more metered and slow, because it also takes a while to come off an experience like that and realize. So like sometimes it'll be weeks until I realize upon revisitation that something had like maybe a traumatic impact, or maybe some specific element of that triggered something else in me, and it's causing this response. And so one of the ways in which aftercare for that, it has to be consistently available for when I realize I may need it. That doesn't mean that you gotta just sit around waiting for me to call you. Well, in this case, he lives with me, so there would be no calling. But just that when I do reach out for it, you reassure me that you will be available as soon as you are able. So there is that. There's also like allowing the things between, like allowing it to have impact. So I think a lot of times there is this pressure to return to like status quo and to prove that it didn't like damage you, or it didn't have like an impact that was too severe. But why would you do these things if you didn't know that they could? They absolutely can. You can't suspend your life for 2 weeks and limit it to a single point, sustain extreme forms of pain continuously, not be able to express your personhood, and think that when you wake up from the end of that experience, it will be impact free. Of course not. So a part of it is also realizing that's the risk you bear, and assessing whether you have the appetite for that risk, or even the desirability for that state of being. So sometimes there is like this desire to mitigate that part of it, but there is a part of it you can mitigate, and there is a part of it you absolutely cannot. So just the comfort that my partner has in knowing that I'm going to go through some difficult shit in the aftermath of it, and I don't need them to fix it, so long as they're just there in whatever capacity that I require them to be. Like, it may be talking to me, or it may be like bringing me chocolate, whatever it is. You're just there to help me through it.
Yeah, it's so important to be risk aware in kink. So thank you for highlighting that and the differences between the two experiences that you had. It's really important for our listeners. Now, I'd like to go back to the kink education that you're offering the world. What do you think is the most pressing topic in kink education today, and how do your works address it?
Honestly, I have no idea. What is the most pressing topic? Look, also something has happened in the past few years, right? Kink has gone kind of mainstream.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of content out there, and there is a lot of content that's aimed outward. There's a lot of like, hey, do you want to be interested in kink? This is what it is. Which kind of condenses it to this tiny little thing that it's possible to learn about using a 40-minute masterclass. I think that's all well and good. I think we should include as many people in the fold as you can. For me, the most important thing is focusing the education inward. So like towards the people who are already like, yeah, you know what, this is what I'm into. Tell me how to do this specific thing without like wrecking somebody's life. So I think safety is maybe the most important. And that's the one that I try to focus myself on. Also, not safety just in physical terms, not safety just in wash your implements and do it this way and not this way, but also like emotional safety, social safety. How much of it is even possible? What is the environment in which you are doing all of this? And what risk does the environment itself bear? So that kind of thing, I think, is extremely important, because since there are a lot more people interested in doing the things that we've been doing, it also means that there are a lot more questions. There's a lot more more people who may not know how to go about it. So like focusing on that is good. Especially since like your mainstream influencers, they have a lot to focus on, like it's all good, it's okay to be this way, and it's okay to be, and it's like they got that covered. So like we can do something else.
So if someone were to take away just one insight from the Sex Book initiative, what would it be?
Don't think that like if you're into something that already exists, you need to adapt yourself to fit its norms. It exists to adapt itself to fit what you need. That is way more important than like the norms that surround a subculture, the norms that surround a fetish, the stereotypes around it. That is secondary, and what you need from it is primary. So if everybody's doing masochism one way, but you want to do it a different way, it doesn't fucking matter that they are doing it that way. Just take everything you can from it, take all information that's helpful to you, and reject the status quo if you want to.
And is there anything else you'd like to share with us today?
Like just in general?
Yeah, anything you'd like to speak about, anything you feel like we haven't covered that you'd like to let people know?
No, I think this was very comprehensive. It was really great to be able to talk to you about all of these things. In general, I'm glad that there are more podcasts about kink that exist, and people who are doing a more detailed exploration into why people want to do the things they do. Individual focus is a great thing, because as you start talking in general, you lose a lot. You lose a lot of like the important depth. So I think it's great what you do, and thank you so much for doing it.
Thank you. The last thing I have to ask you, if you were to sum up your sexuality in just one word, what would that word be at the moment?
Tragedy.
Thank you.
Pain is like, so sorry, I'm sorry. I tried to explain the one word answer.
That's okay.
I can't help it.
Go for it.
As in tragedy in the sense that, not that it's a terrible thing, just that like pain plus emotion. It's just like, it's just that.
I love the intensity of it. And I'd like to thank you for being so open and sharing yourself with me and our listeners today, Ancilla, and also for the work that you're doing in kink education. Where can we find out more about you and the work that you're doing with the Sex Book initiative?
So you can buy all of the books on Amazon in most of the world. If you're in India, I distribute them personally because the books aren't accessible here because of censorship. So if you want, you can reach me over Instagram, Ancillary Kink Support. I have a website, also Ancillary Kink Support. You can find me on FetLife, AncillaL, or you can also subscribe to my Patreon. I post a podcast and all of my classes there. So if you subscribe, you get access to all of my classes and you don't have to attend live.
Wonderful. Thank you again for being here today, Ancilla. I'm Em, and this has been the Erotic Realm Podcast. Thank you for listening to the Erotic Realm. If this episode stirred something in you, please take a moment to follow the show, leave a rating, or write a review on wherever you're listening. It helps more people find the show and brings visibility to this deeper conversation about eroticism and self-understanding. I'd also like to invite you to dive deeper into the psychology of desire, including my writing, research, and upcoming courses over at psychologyofdesire.com. And if you want the full experience, join thousands of curious minds on my Substack at psychologyofdesire.substack.com. This is where I release the Psychology of Desire case files, behind the scenes thoughts, and intimate reflections every week, plus more. Until next time, stay curious, stay embodied, and keep exploring. Also, as always, stay perverted.